If you were on the high seas rally this year, you probably heard somebody whisper about a rider who didn't exist. Number 17. This is what really happened on the ROATÁN'S stop, and why there's a milk crate full of tools under a stand of mangroves at Dixon Cove with a white race plate on top that says 17. The morning we eased into Mahogany Bay, the ship smelled like coffee and chain lube and sunscreen. Patches flashed in the sun as the charity ride mustered. Texas, Ohio, Ontario, a handful of skulls that grin like they're in on a joke. You get a different energy on a bike cruise. Open water instead of open highway, but the same ritual. Thumb the tire pressure gauge like a gambler palming dice. Gloved fingers on sprocket teeth. Flip your comms on, check, check, good. We lined up by the numbered placards, zip-tied to bars and risers the way we always do, and rolled out for the ROATÁN Loop, Mahogany Bay to Dixon Cove, cut past Coxon Hole, Sandy Bay, an overlook above West End, and back before the heat punched the island flat. We were maybe 10 minutes into the parade pace when somebody on the lead's shoulder cam froze a frame and said, "Who's 17?" It was a clean white plate, big black 17, riding tight on the left. We all did the polite version of looking around without moving our heads, because when something is wrong near a motorcycle, you use your ears first. The marshal patted his vest for the clipboard and frowned. "There is no 17 today." The comms chirped in the same moment. Copy, copy, keep it tight, predictable. And a second voice seemed to sit in the middle of our speakers, close and low, like a mic inside a chin bar. "Copy, 17 in position. Copy." ROATÁN feels like the ocean got tucked into the hills and forgot to leave. Palms lean in like they've been listening for a very long time. In Coxon Hole, the road pinches and fans, sharing space with trucks, scooters, walkers, and one guy who bounced a fistful of limes on a windshield like castanets until the rider paid him to make the joke official. Past the market, the asphalt changed color, as if the island paints with storm memory. Dark here, pale there, salt marking where waves had slapped it in a past life. "Single file," the lead called. "Keep it predictable." The second voice echoed it, softer, predictable. We pulled into a dusty turnout over a blue bowl of water, the kind of view that makes you remember the island is a chain of vertebrae and you're standing on one. Vendors had guessed we were coming. I've never seen coconuts open that fast with a machete, and I have seen some things. A girl with carnival bright nail polish handed out something purple that tasted like honesty about sugar. A man at a folding table sold beaded bracelets, and because this is ROATÁN, a dozen kinds of fish hooks he swore doubled as lucky zipper pulls. He winked like luck is a convertible currency. The marshal finally said what we were all thinking. "Seriously, where did 17 come from?" Nobody answered because nobody could. Then a local guy tipped his hat with his chin toward the shoreline and said, "Road there." But there wasn't, at least not the kind you ride. What he meant was a ghost of a road. A pale concrete seam you could only see when the sun rolled across it at the right angle, revealed like a scar under clear water. Old port access from before the cruise ships did their polite kiss against the dock. Islands keep old roads the way the sea keeps old ships. Not gone, just waiting. "No engines," the marshal said. "On foot. Helmets off." We filed down into the mangroves like a line of question marks. The concrete was narrower than it looked from the turnout, and slick in places where the tide had lacquered it. Crabs ticked sideways into root shade, the sound like someone shaking a pocket of screws. Our boots made the hollow drum noise all abandoned infrastructure has. The seam ran maybe 40 yards and ended where some hurricane had taken a bite. On the far side, tucked back under mangrove branches like it was hiding on purpose, was a bright plastic milk crate padlocked to a galvanized stake. The crate was full of tools, mismatched wrenches, a ratchet neck wrapped with electrical tape, a crescent that had been somebody's favorite. Screwed to the stake was a hand-lettered board. "Deja una herramienta. Leva una herramienta. Leave a tool. Take a tool." and laid on top, under a folded rag, was a white plastic plate with a number in black, 17. Nobody said anything for a long beat. Not the kind of silence you fill, more like the kind you listen to. The local man took his hat fully off. "People leave them when the island keeps something," he said. "Wheel nut, chain link, hose. We fix, we ride. You fix, you ride. Sometimes you come back and your piece is waiting for somebody else." That should have been the whole story, neat and salty and complete. But our comms cracked again, the soft second voice still sitting too close to our ears. Tight, predictable. Leave it better. Then a click like a breaker settling, and nothing. We shook it off and did the only thing that made sense. A woman with a red bandana dug a 12mm socket out of her vest pocket, the souvenir of a Tampa parking lot, save that it kept a stator cover from becoming a story, and dropped it into the empty slot like a tooth in a grin. A kid with fresh patches unzipped his zip-tie stash and made a chain of little white flags that rattled like rain when he let them go. The bracelet vendor traded us paracord for coconut waters and called it even because currency is elastic in places like this. Someone added a fresh bandage, still sealed. A man from Amarillo left a quarter-used roll of rescue tape and said, "That stuff's church." Then the marshal surprised us all by taking his own ride plate, 28, off his riser and setting it next to the white 17. He didn't say why. He didn't have to. We inventoried the crate like it was both toolbox and memorial. Ratchet, 3/8, 2 sockets missing, 10 and 14. A T-handle Allen, bowed a little from honest use. A stubby screwdriver with no loyalty to Phillips or flat. Electrical tape mashed flat by weather. A handful of fresh hardware inside a Ziploc. A plug kit with 1 string left. The kind of kit that tells you exactly what gets broken on islands and how people choose to fix it. The kind of kit that says riders have been here, and fishermen, and people who understand that the difference between stranded and moving is often one turn of the wrist and a little hope. On the way back across the concrete seam, the second voice finally made enough sense for the puzzle pieces to sit down where they belonged. A guy from the sweep truck tapped his comm unit and said, "You hear that freight pilot frequency? They're bouncing off our helmets. They say those same words, tight, predictable, leave it better." He shrugged. Port voices. Not ghosts. You could feel something in the group release at that. A rational peg for an irrational shape. It didn't make the hair on anyone's neck lie completely flat, but it gave it a reason to stand. Here's the part that matters. People talk about big gestures when they talk about biker charity rides, parades, checks, 1,000 miles in weather that tries to talk you out of it. But the thing that actually changes days is small and repeatable. A socket in the right slot, a zip tie in a glove box, a plate you don't keep. And the High Seas Rally understands that better than most. We do the party, sure, but we also do the little fixes for strangers we'll never meet again, because somewhere somebody did the little fix for us. We wrote a line on the inside of that crate's rim with a sun-faded Sharpie the local guy handed over like it was a lit match. High Seas Rally, ROATÁN, leave it better. A few names around it, small. Not a plaque, just handwriting. The man nodded like he'd seen names go on boats and market stalls and headstones and understood that ink is a way people promise themselves to places. Before we left, the marshal tested the lock, then tucked the folded rag back over the plate with 17, like you cover something in a shop when you're done for the day. Back on the bikes, the line rolled out with that easy, respectful rhythm you only get when everyone understands why the pace is the pace. Kids waved from stoops. A rooster sprinted across a lane like he was late for his own story. The guy with the limes tried his windshield routine again and failed, but he laughed anyway because the attempt is the point. At the last turn before Mahogany Bay, we passed a little cinder block garage with a hand-painted sign that said Mitch in letters the weather had been chewing. A man under a Yamaha looked up, thumbed the bill of his cap, and gave us the kind of nod men give each other when they understand more than they say. By the time we parked on the pier, the shoulder cam footage had already started showing up in our group chats. Freeze frames of the mangroves, a slow pan across a crate with a padlock freckled by rust. The white plate with 17. People on the ship wanted to know if it was a memorial and, if so, for who. We told the truth. It's for whoever needs it next. That night after the deck party, the wind found its way between the railings and did the soft harmonica thing ships do when the air is right. I sat with a plastic cup of water and watched the green-white churn unbraid in the wake and thought about how many little repairs it takes to keep anything moving. Bikes, boats, people. The comms lay silent on the table, dark screens reflecting the ship's lights, and in my head I could still hear the freight pilot channel. Tight, predictable, leave it better. It made a kind of sense that our mystery voice had been something practical all along. That's what this community is when you strip away the patches and the noise. Practical, stubborn kindness pointed in the direction of forward. The next morning, we did another slow roll past the turnout above Dixon Cove. No stop this time, just a long look down through the green. If you knew where to look, you could see the pale seam again. You could not see the crate. That felt right, out of sight, in service. The line stayed tidy, the brakes whispered instead of bit, and the marshal's hand signals carved their usual geometry through the air. Merge, stagger, slow. A few of us glanced at each other over our mirrors and smiled without showing teeth. We knew the most important thing we left on Roatan wasn't money or merch, it was a habit. Back on board, the photos started to grow legs. Someone cropped the crate, someone else pushed the contrast until the number on the plate shouted black against white. People in the comments told stories. We have one like that out by mile 12 in Arizona. There's a kid in Belize who keeps a coffee can full of fuses for tourists. My granddad nailed a vise to a fence post after the hurricane. 2 years later, it was still there, just shinier. The more they posted, the less strange the second voice felt, and the more it sounded like what it really was. The world reminding us of our own rules, echoed back in a new place. If you're heading to Roatan on some future high seas rally and you get a few hours on land, ask around for the old port seam near Dixon Cove. Don't ride it, walk it. Bring something small that fixes something big. Write small. Don't post the exact spot. Let the island keep its private way of being generous. And if you hear a voice in your comms that sounds closer than it should be, let it talk. It might just be a pilot telling you how not to become a story that needs a crate. People keep asking about 17. Here's what I think now that I've played the footage too many times. 17 wasn't a rider. It was a reminder. A number the island loaned us long enough for us to notice a habit worth keeping. We put the plate back under the rag and locked the crate because that's what you do when something is more useful than it is dramatic. And then we rode the rest of the loop the way we always say we will, tight, predictable, and we left the place a little better than we found it. If you were there, you already know the point. If you weren't, you do now. High seas, rally, Roatan. There's a milk crate under the mangroves that belongs to whoever gets stuck next, and some rider you'll never meet has already paid your toll in zip ties and sockets. That's our kind of ghost story. Practical, kind, and ready when you are.